it takes on a sort of mythical quality because people just can't believe it can be done. But within that tiny space, he's created an entire career.
One of the great stories of someone who lost his mother's life savings in the late 90s. He then goes on this 8-year journey to land on a prop firm. Then on the prop firm, he goes through his evolution of skill acquisition. Then he arrives in 2016, the collapse of a prop firm and the loss of 7-figure trading account. Then he builds his trading account to multiple millions. Then he has the trade of his life that he's been discounting and reviewing for the last decade disappear from his grasp again, for it only to resurface. And all of a sudden, he's just put on, in the space of 1 week, the trade that he'd mapped back more than 12 years ago. So this is a trader that in 2017 made $1 million with approximately 300 trades in only being in the market for 4 minutes. This is a very special trader that we're speaking about today that's had the ultimate. He could always be called Hero Part 2 or Hero Version 1. And he truly has this heroic journey of where many traders could have quit. This is a trader from a small Italian village who literally did a walkabout all the way across to the UK. And this is also a trader that went with 5 years without a losing month, approximately 15 years without a losing year. And he's having his best years as he goes into his 50s. And this is also a trader who just the other day, has just been ticking away, made an almost 100-figure day on Trump Open just the other night. And the most inspiring story for every trader out there who wants to read a book, and specifically this chapter, we call him the Razor, and you'll fill us in why I called him the Razor. So if I hand it over to you of this, these incredible statistics of this trader, who also has a day where he's made in excess of $3.5 million in a day trade. A very special trade that we describe in the book, in his chapter. Of this trade was almost 15 years in the making. The chapter hits this area hard and how he made this money. And he also left probably another $3.5 million on the table on that trade. But it was a trade of stamina. And so who is the Razor and who would want to read the Razor's chapter?
And welcome to chapter 2 of Traders of Our Time. The Razor is all about, Alex, as suggested by his name, a master of the absolute fundamentals. It is especially those who need to have a wake-up call, perhaps a alarm bell, or perhaps seek clarity through needing to go back to basics, but actually to understand what the basics actually are. And he is truly a master of fundamentals. So the Razor is someone, let's say we want to give this, let's say each chapter is a diagnostic. We can diagnose someone with some issue, and the chapter can be then a reflective mirror for them to go deeper. So the Razor, in my opinion, if I had to give it to someone, it would be someone who is in that very deep, messy middle. They are, in fact, something I experienced for a long time as a trader, where it's not necessarily on your first day as a trader, it's not necessarily in your first year as a trader. It's in that sort of 2-3 year period where you're growing in knowledge and your learning is still very accelerated, but just putting all the pieces of the puzzle together, you just build up a mountain and you get lost. That is not to say the mountain is the problem. In fact, you have to be building up all of these spare parts and all of these accumulation of knowledge and so on, because then what comes next is reductive mastery. Or rather, the path to mastery is through a reductive nature. But you can't be reductive from the beginning when you have nothing to work with. So the Razor, again, is this way to cut through the noise and to both understand what is absolutely essential and how so much can be done with so little. And I mean that in many, many ways, which I think people appreciate once they read their chapter. But to take it quite literally, he is someone who has mastered capturing the very next tick. He is someone who has mastered absolutely minimal, as little as possible time exposure in a trade. And as you highlighted, Alex, he has extracted over 7 figures, for example, in 2017, by being roughly 240 seconds in the market for the whole year. That is the definition of someone who has no slack in their trading, who has mastered the entire fundamentals of the game and has pushed that to the limits. He is also someone, and it's interesting how I think we purposely begun the book with his chapter 2, or rather the opening shot of all the traders is the Razor. because we do talk about the nature of absolute performance and reaching the peak through the warrior. But we also want to make it clear to people that the razor shows alternatives to the end game for people to realize that there is an end game. What does success look like as a trader? Do you want the success as a trader, or what you might imagine success to be? Should there even be an end game in trading? But the razor is someone who, shall we say, forgoes additional upside for ludicrous, unimaginable consistency. And from his worldview, foregoing that extra 3 million, right or not, depending on who you ask, was in keeping very much within his methods, madness, or clarity, in the sense of he doesn't want time exposure because that introduces all sorts of emotions, and he is a deeply emotional trader. So he is someone who understands himself perfectly and has now burdened himself. He has chosen the correct burdens of his trading. And that's something we talk about in his chapter, Alex, the burdens of a strategy. There's always a cost to trading, and you have to instead select the one you can shoulder better than others.
What we're trying to, throughout the chapters, is provide the reader a spectrum, a broad understanding of all the different characters who make it in this game.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all varied, but there are some similarities and common denominators, certain behavioral traits that we bring to life in the book. But the razor is also this unassuming individual who prides incredibly close relationships. It takes time to cultivate those relationships, but once you're in his inner circle, he is the most giving, most profoundly unselfish individual who provides extreme amounts of his own personal time and truly values friendship with regards to time spent. This is also a trader who has singularly changed most traders' careers. He has been responsible through his process, his approach, and his framework is observation of the market through red, hot-blooded eye watching of the market. So observation. And through all the observation, you're going to find patterns. And this is a filtering process. And from all the patterns, what are the strategies that dovetail into your unique biology of how to exploit those patterns? You could have 1,000 observational sample sets. From those 1,000, you have 10 patterns. From those 10 patterns, you probably only have one strategy. And so this is a profoundly simple framework, but powerful, and that's how he's governed his entire trading career. Now, again, I mentioned he has been responsible. There are traders that came onto his floor. He opened up the Poland office, senior head elite trader of the Poland office. And there are junior traders who were able to make multiple six figures in a couple of months, learning directly underneath him. There's also been traders who've moved from other countries to be alongside him and have had 7-figure careers. And so his influence and his ability to communicate his strategy, but the one shining observation is that each one of these traders, if they left his immediate vicinity off a trading floor, felt that maybe I've made enough money, I can do this on my own, I can go, and we explore this throughout the chapters, that those traders who then offloaded themselves from the so-called knowledge matrix of the Poland floor, careers generally went down south. Whereas the traders who remain, it also made you understand that they learned a strategy, not an entire process, framework, mental models, and a system of what the razor had accumulated all of those years. And that's a big thing. You can teach any man to fish with a strategy, or you can provide them a strategy as provide someone with a fish, but he knows how to go in the market and extract edge. He had a roundabout route. Do you just want to explain, this trader from a small Italian village, from a single mother, a bit of his background before we go into his journey into the London prop industry?
If you're enjoying this discussion about the razor, one of the traders and traders of our time, and you want to go deeper, head over to tradersofourtime.com to sign up and get chapter 1 for free. You'll stay in the loop with exclusive content, insights, and updates, and you'll be among the first to read the book when it launches on March 27, 2025.
He is someone who has suffered the market's demand for your pound of flesh. And what that meant was entering the markets when he was a much more relatively young buck in the internet, the bull market in internet stocks and the bubble and so on and so forth. In
the dot-com days.
The dot-com days in the late 90s, which perhaps is the precursor to the same influx that we have now, with crypto and so on. But it was that generation's sort of first understanding of trading. Long story short, within a single position or trade, he ended up losing his entire account, which was entirely funded by his mother's life savings.
His entire account lost on what was the darling dairy stock or the darling stock Parmalat in Italy.
In Italy at the time, yes. And we talk about that story in further detail. But it's interesting how that was then the beginning. It was the market rejecting him, and instead that emboldened him to continue rather than just leaving it all behind.
And just on that, sorry, Bogdan, you just mentioned that emboldened him. Josh Waitzkin speaks about the catalyzing moments for growth. His biggest loss in his life, Josh Waitzkin on a chessboard in a world championship, he spent 3 months studying the position that lost him the championship. And that position that he studied resulted in him winning the world championship in martial arts and push hands Tai Chi. And there's that common denominator, right? Or those traders who huge monumental moments in their life where 99% run away from is just the greatest stepping stone for growth.
Because loss is like rejection, and they just can't handle rejection well. And it's interesting because a lot of the discussions and the common ideas around, handling loss in trading and trades, individual trades is, being able to take it and move on. That is very different, though, to a career-wide loss or a career-wide fork in the road where you're just taking a massive hit or you got to now make very consequential decisions to where you're going next. That is very different. And that in each circumstance with all these traders, that monumental existential crisis, they responded by, no, this is the start of something new. And it was. And in fact, it wasn't that our trader somehow reloaded his account and then worked his way up to millions the next year or something like that. No, in fact, he actually worked. He has continued on. He took 8 years, at least 8 years, to go onto a trading floor after that. And abroad in England.
And he was hiding the fact to his mother that he never lost her life savings. Yes. But inside, the inner voice was saying, I'm going to make this back for my mother and I'm going to reward my mother. But it might not happen today, tomorrow. And as you mentioned, 8 years later until he was able to potentially redeem himself from that loss or learn.
Yes, it was the beginning of an 8-year redemption arc. And that included grinding away for a long time, working part-time jobs, working in a biscuit factory where, people still call him back years later. The boss is saying, you're a best employee ever. Do you want to come back? They're calling up a trader who is now worth several millions to do that. For very good reasons, which we'll get into in a minute, about his perfectionist obsession attitude. Long story short, he ended up on the floor first time in 8 years later. He was already, well into his 30s. And then he had, the biggest of opportunity costs in terms of career direction, life direction, had probably, savings of maybe a year, less. So that then created a very unique trader because you see, unlike people who have stumbled into our profession, who can take their opportunity for granted, who swing and while away and be like, oh yeah, okay, cool, whatever. Here's someone who said, if I lose this opportunity, I will lose 8 years worth of effort and focus to get the life savings back.
Yeah.
So that forged a very, very unique trader from the outset who prioritized safety above all else.
I never thought of it as much as like that. What you just expressed now, Bogdan, that he had to create, there was this 8-year journey where some junior traders, luckily located near a floor, but it took him 8 years to get onto a floor where he felt he could now learn and pick up his game and acquire those spare parts, which we speak about in the chapter on the student. 8 years. Think about the soul-blooded drive of that moment of losing the money versus, say, traders who just arrive on the floor, have all the optionality in the world. He gave himself no options, and he was just dog-minded that he will somehow, from working in biscuit factories on an Italian, from an Italian small village, that he's going to arrive onto a trading floor.
And then that's forged this extremely unique trader who is quite literally, he says he forgoes additional upside, forgoes variance in the sense of having extreme safety in his trading. And again, we can talk more about that a bit later. That is not to say he doesn't take risk. He takes ludicrous risk, caveated with an extreme control of his trade environment and so on. Again, we'll get into it. But yes, 8 years, and then now it's his only shot. To reiterate one more time, it is not someone who just stumbled onto a trading floor through happenstance or through just applying willy-nilly through a program and just happened to make it through. And then yes, this was the, his presence. And then he came onto the floor in 2007 and then spotted a trade through the financial crisis, which is the centerpiece of the beginning of his chapter, that happened in the financial crisis that he couldn't trade or trade in any kind of realistic size, that he saw, he observed through his own powers of observation, saw a pattern which he could potentially use, and then spent the next decade building a way to trade it through a strategy.
The power of curious obsession, that this trade that he saw in 2007, as you mentioned, observed it. And then observation is a function of, wow, that was an unusual move. Angus Fletcher, I work with Angus Fletcher, talks about exceptional information. Humans are incredible at observing exceptional information. The outliers, machines discount them. And this observation of this move in the US equities, and he told himself back then in 2000, he had that, almost that foresight. And he said to himself, that's a trade that if I see it again, I'm going to make $1 million from that trade. Now, we know what the story happened. So, yeah, so just that type of foresight. So then, as you're mentioning, fast forward to March 2020. But even before March 2020, I don't know how much we're going to elaborate on the story, but before March 2020, the trade actually popped up in 2015, and he was unable to exploit it.
Mm-hmm.
And he was unable to exploit it because, sadly, he was at a funeral. And he had been preparing for that trade for over 5 or 6 years. So he missed that. And the trade didn't appear its head until
I think there was one more instance in between then, but it didn't materialize exactly within the parameters he wanted, on Trump's first election victory. Then it coalesced into the events of March 2020, which again was many near misses, had many, shall we say, plot twists, which I'll leave slightly more towards the chapter because we build that through his chapter. And then that led to, his career goal, perhaps life goal, one can say.
But even before this plot twist.
Yes.
Even before this plot twist. What happened before? Because he had another plot twist just before that plot twist. A big one.
A lot of these traders had to restart from zero. We mentioned it in the introduction. That is, restarting from zero, not because of bad trading or bad circumstances or fault of their own. It is because of management and mismanaging funds at an old, now defunct prop firm, which the Razor was a part of at the time. Go to 2016, the traders all wake up, no funds in accounts, money is gone, and the Razor, the whole, since 2007, was living in a, as he called it, a dreary small town in England, spending literally probably a fraction of a percent of what he was making, withdrew nothing from his trading account. So he was grinding his way up to $1 million throughout the entire period. And just as he then made the move to Poland, just as he then started to want to withdraw some of the money to, pay for an apartment, for an office and so on, it all got taken away.
And we're talking about one day you've got a 7-figure plus trading account. The next morning, it's gone. And you've got approximately in your pocket, in your personal bank account, after a decade of trading, $60,000. All that $60,000, you're having to give it to lawyers. Half of that, a decade's worth of money gone, left with approximately $30,000 in your personal pocket. You're over 40, and you're in a place that the majority would just cave in. The emotionally ridden, grief, anger, all those emotions that stop you pushing forward. But this was the release. And this was truly the rise of the proverbial phoenix. And Bogdan, if that moment, and we're capturing in that chapter, there were a lot of incidents that had to take place, but he had to start over. He said, I won't come back to London. I love Poland. I'd rather be in the streets of Poland than be in an apartment in London, in a penthouse apartment in London. He was living his best years for the first time. decade, sharing rooms in London, having his own nice apartment in the tallest building in this Poland town. And all of a sudden, the world just changed. His world just changed, and many other traders within this firm's world changed. Losing that 7 figures, what next?
What next was 2 months of no trading, followed by incredible returns trading consistency, to the point where if you look at his return statistics in 2016, you would know that none of this had ever happened if you were none the wiser about the wider story.
Because he recapped with a very close friend who supported him to recap, with an account of approximately, $50,000.
It was under 100,000, just shy of that. And yes, he refunded with, the small team, the partnership between Axia and FCT Europe at the time, and then was flying because, he was then given the leverage, the size, but most importantly, the trust that he is this very, very, very special trader that can grow exponentially and in a non-linear fashion. And that is the caliber of someone we're dealing with. Someone who had his entire progress shattered, someone who had, through a series of injustices, suffered all of this. And again, you'd be none the wiser looking at his trading. In fact, his trading improves for the rest of the year. He's someone who said, he was crying every day for a month. And by the end of the year, he was bringing in within a year, roughly a year after, he was already up 7 figures.
It's a smaller account.
It is 100%, Alex, beautifully. The way, trading perhaps can also be redefined as a way of how a trader finds exceptional information, trades exceptional information, and leverages exceptional information, and has a conviction to go big on exceptional information, but is also dealing with situations that are exceptional and navigating that. And again, each trader in this book navigated exceptional circumstances in trades and in their career in very consistent, proactive ways, which are important to highlight because a large majority take the other way.
Isn't that a lesson for life? With every big fork, with every exceptional moment that seems so unfair that the gods are looking down and almost cursing you, of where you rise up from that. Because that is the profound growth. And all the traders in this book, they have these stories where they're having to either retreat or advance. And every single one of them advances with the skill sets, the learning techniques that we describe in the book. And so 2016 and 17, starts up with a team. The following year has a 7-figure year, had never had a 7-figure year before. All of a sudden, all of those years that he accumulated the spare parts, having the support and the backing of Mario and FCT at the time, which is now Axia Markets Pro, all of a sudden, his wings were able to start flapping. And he was able to truly express himself as a trader, whereas before, there was this constriction.
There was a culture of not giving you size. There was a culture of having to bargain for it. There was a culture of not even understanding what could be possible in terms of, just how much you can grow in the size and so on and so forth. Whereas then he was thrown into an environment where it was the opposite effect, it was getting, not necessarily in case of the razor.
It's like, feed me Seymour, and I was just getting more and more size.
Yeah. Now it's the opposite, like, they're just throwing size on me. What's going on? Like, and so on. So again, wildly different cultures, approaches, and so on, because again, the prop firm of tomorrow allows the non-linear operator, the non-linear trader, to leverage exceptional information in keeping with this phrase by thinking of sizing in a non-linear way as well, from a prop perspective.
And just a very recent, what you mentioned about it, just a very recent point. I just spoke to Mario the other day, heads up all the sizing, the risk for the team, and he is going across the team's messaging to the traders who have proven themselves, who have edge, who are consistent, is doubling their size. Doubling their size now because we know now in these so-called Trump markets, the uncertainty that is Trump, the uncertainty that is the American administration, that this type of uncertainty does not exist on a consistent basis over a period of time. And so to exploit this is deploying non-linear sizing towards a team. And this is just a case in point of the sense of occasion.
Exceptional sizing for an exceptional situation for exceptional information. That's how it must be done, and that's probably the best way to summarize all these traders in the book, and how the prop firm of the future must evolve. It is not a linear look at a spreadsheet. Okay, that guy stopped out. Cool. Let's just send him away home. Not even realize that these are, history-making events, extremely wide economic implications, and so on and so forth. And these are the days that we'll be talking about in terms of from a trading perspective for a very long time.
Yeah, there's always that story, right? Oh, do you remember the financial crisis days? Do you remember we will in 10 years on? Do you remember the Trump years? As a trader, you were new junior traders coming in, the senior guys saying, "Oh, we need another Trump." But these are truly that aspect of what released the razor, that non-linear way. That in 2017, as we mentioned right at the beginning, he executed approximately 300 trades. Were in those trades for 240 seconds. And he made over 7 figures.
It was truly a vintage year for the razor. Showing the contrast of absolute chaos in his outer exterior life, absolute control within his trading. He still doubled down and still purchased an office. He still purchased later on when he could, very recent to the time, an apartment in Poland. And as I like to say, I think for you to understand the trader, for you to understand the traders, you also have to look at the space and the desks. We mentioned this in the previous video. That office there, if you want to understand the razor's edge, you're far better, a far better use of your time sometimes might be to look at really deeply at the office to understand what a perfectionist
and this
the
is
razor
the office that he created in Poland.
Yes, took 4 years. Someone who handcrafted his desks, built a whole thing from scratch. To him, as we said in the other video, the carpets are as important as trade execution. Perfection is non-negotiable. And for someone who's an obsessive, meticulous person like him, it pervades every aspect of your life. Maybe to his detriment sometimes. But again, what helps you trading hurts your life, and what helps your life hurts your trading. And you can see that with the razor. And to be, to go specifically from his understanding his office to then understanding his trading. I think what should be extremely emphasized here, Alex, is yes, we're dealing with someone who might on the surface be said as risk averse, who might on the surface can also be said, he seeks safety above all else. But he's someone then who could flip on the switch and go from extreme safety seeking to have the largest testicular fortitude on the floor and put on 1,000 S&P lots within a fraction of a second after watching that trade for a decade, after watching another trade for months and do absolutely nothing and then put on the size. So what we say in the chapter is that he's someone who's not adverse to risk aversion in the classical sense that everyone might look at it at university and learn it through that way. He is someone who is averse to situations of high variance. And his craft is observing, finding instances of the market within market phenomena, patterns, if you want to call it that, where the market can only do so many things. In a situation where the market variance, let's say variance is the range of outcomes in similar situations, is so limited, the market can literally do 1 or 2 things. And that's the areas, that's the stone he'll be operating under. And that stone is left unturned by many, many traders. So when traders sort of hear about the kind of things he does and that he trades, it takes on a sort of mythical quality because people just can't believe it can be done. And they never really have it in their worldview that a trader could operate and leverage such a career in such tiny spaces of the market. But within that tiny space, he's created an entire career,
And that entire career, and let's speak about this career that started in the early days during the financial crisis. And what we're going to speak about there is the evolution of strategy. And then we're going to be discussing the burden of strategy. But this evolution of strategy started out as during the financial crisis, retracement trades on the Euro stocks, making money, being consistent, being up in his first year of trading. Following that, then as his expertise and his skills started developing, he started becoming exceptional at order flow anomaly plays, taking 1 to 2 ticks through observing algorithmic behavior that he could trade around and in and out within microseconds, from seeing large orders on the order book to seeing algorithmic plays happening on the order book that he was able to exploit by being in the market in as little time as possible, simply because the longer he'd in the market, the more emotional exposure there would be, and that didn't fit his demeanor. So strategies needed to fit him like a suit, as described in the book. And then at the and the background, there's this trade that he observes, that he says one day, so he has this research and development department. He can observe, look at patterns, not find a strategy, but keep on logging the information because one day he might find a strategy that fits his personality to exploit that market. And so from retracement trades in the European index to then multiple anomalous trades to then finding these momentum breakout trades in the commodity markets, which from the years of 2015 to around 2020, some of these trades he'd been for a second and make well north of six figures in these momentum trades of the commodity markets. So he goes from these certain scalps to certain anomalous plays, or first retracement trades. There's the trade of a lifetime that's being visualized in the background, visualized every year, putting in plans. 2016, 2020 is commodity plays, and then 2020 arrives, and now there's a trade of the lifetime, and we describe it, in the book. And so, if you want to see one of the great trades of our time, it's in chapter 2 of The Razor, describing all the calamitous, all the global craziness that was going on that night, where the trade of his life almost was unable to execute simply because of what clearers, brokers were demanding with all this excessive volatility. He had entered the trade with size over approximately 600 S&P contracts. A couple of days before that, he was 1,000 S&P contracts in, but some Japanese news came out, and that was potentially the best trade of his life, because if he lost on that trade, he wouldn't have had the optionality or the margin to trade the other trade. Now, I'm not going to describe in detail all the potential distraction and noise that he was having whilst he was in this trade, or that he might need to liquidate this trade, even though his risk was iron tight. And that night and that trade, what would happen that week before that, he was in the Caribbean on a holiday, and the markets were collapsing. His trade was in play. He called me. I said, Alex, I'm flying over from the Caribbean, stopping over to London before I go to Poland. This trade is coming up. Can you give me a desk ready? I'll run from the airport and I'll get to the desk and hopefully I can execute. He runs from the airport. He probably misses it within 20 minutes, this trade. He's devastated. This trade only comes around every 5 years. However, this trade occurs another 5 to 7 times that next week. And so now he's in Poland. He's able to exploit this trade. He makes on one of them 800,000. He makes on another one 3.5 million. Within the space of a week, he made $5 million. And we explore this trade in chapter 2 of the Razor. And for me, that's one of the greatest stories, I think, throughout the chapter, throughout the book. One of the great stories of someone who lost his mother's life savings in the late 90s. He then goes on this 8-year journey to land on a prop firm. Then on the prop firm, he goes through his evolution of skill acquisition. Then he arrives in 2016, the collapse of a prop firm and the loss of 7-figure trading account. Then he builds his trading account to multiple millions, leading to 2020. Then he has the trade of his life that he's been discounting and reviewing for the last decade disappear from his grasp again, for it only to resurface. And all of a sudden, he's just put on, in the space of 1 week, the trade that he'd mapped back more than 12 years ago. This is just this measure of this trader of firstly never giving up, never giving in, having an incredible market awareness, but most importantly, if you could describe his self-awareness.
His self-awareness to the effect that, imagine yourself in this position, to those viewing right now. Imagine this intense arc that you've had your entire life, and you've had the biggest trade that just dwarfed everything that came before, just psychologically, and your morale upticking and this exploding. And the question is, how do you handle what happens next? That, for me, what happens off stage is the real story and the real measure of this trader, for me personally. Because how he handles that is truly what separates him from a lot of other traders who can and have given it back. And he's given none of it back. And we discuss how and why, and his foresight in preparing himself, not just for the trade, but what happens, how you manage yourself after the trade.
You mean like all of a sudden that adrenaline, that achievement of a multiple 7-figure day, big multiple 7-figure week, how do you go about consolidating that type of potential emotion euphoria, all the hormones that are being triggered, all the financial life changes in your life? And the maturity was, I remember him saying, Bogdan, it was all about just being green next month. Obviously, I'm not going to get even anywhere near that type of P&L. Even if that P&L for the next month is only $10,000, it was just to be green. Because how many traders do we see in 2020 after the P&L of March 2020, certain traders went on these unbelievable bad runs because they were unable to self-regulate themselves, their emotions, their new financial positions in life, that they went on, probably their worst runs for the next 6, 7, 8 months. Some actually potentially never even recovered from their account peak. So his foresight again was, how do I equalize myself? How do I reset? How do I create a space after this huge P&L? I think this is fractal in the sense of when you have a huge day, your biggest month, your biggest day, what do you do the next session?
And in the words of the Razor, he literally said, if I'm up even $1,000, $2,000, that is the best trade. So can you imagine the coming off that high of making multi-million and then just being content with a few thousand the next day?
Absolutely. And that again, we mentioned in the other videos, Stan Drachman, you got to be competitive for the opportunity set. That testicular fortitude in that week and that moment of a trader who is deemed as not taking any risk. I remember the Warrior, many of the traders were blown away what he did that week. Because they're also blown away what he did during the time of the firm going down and being probably the bravest soul to make big decisions against the firm in order to move on. And so this is someone that when you read this chapter, you gain a big sense. It's a chapter for those who are reading it. Regardless of your position, the Razor has been through it multiple times over. And so that belief, that fortitude, that level of conviction, his chapter on its own is a chapter that should inspire you regardless of any circumstances that you've been in.
Alex, you said it perfectly. I just want to return to something very quickly. I think it's extremely important, something that the Razor always talks about. You talked about people coming on and off his floor, him making careers, helping people develop their careers and so on. And you mentioned here something very important. You said he first started very, very early days, again, all the way back to 2007, how he was taking these Eurostoxx retracement trades, how he was taking several various scalp trades. Here, I want to highlight for all those who are new traders, for all those who have spent a long time in the retail world, you hear me saying these specifics. The wrong thing to do right now is to then pull up a Eurostoxx chart, pull up some kind of way you can think of retracements and start taking retracement trades just because you heard some kind of trader doing this a long time ago. Those are the details, and those details are borderline irrelevant. If you hear someone saying, oh, he takes his scalp trades, oh, he's a scalper. What you need to also realize is that the Razor takes these trades with ultra low frequency. It is not him clicking 1 million times a day, with one particular exception, but it's extremely low frequency. So because people, again, a lot of the time conflate scalping with high frequency level of trades. But that brings me to the level of, back to this point that the Razor talks about, which is contamination. And this is extremely important. One of the reasons why we put the Razor right at the beginning is because a lot of people confuse a pattern and a strategy because they've been contaminated. And what I mean by this is as follows. You'll hear us talking about some kind of trade, again, whether it's relevant now, whether it's relevant back in 2007, whether it's relevant for anyone. And that trader will then just start, as I said, pull up the Eurostoxx chart and start taking all these trades. You've just been given it backwards. You haven't used the natural powers of your own particular observation, which, for all you know, could actually be much more pronounced and much more useful than others. You've taken on a strategy which has so many permutations which are not fitted for you. You've been given a random or perhaps a pattern that is extremely out of context, and you've misapplied it. And then you think, oh, each retracement trade has to be taken in this way. So what you've done is the market phenomena that is a retracement has been conflated for a strategy. But those are two separate things. Because the way patterns play out, again, whatever market phenomena you want to classify as a pattern, if it's a massively hawkish central banker speaking in the context of a very dovish central bank, and all of a sudden the markets fly off the page and you have your breakouts and your momentum flows And then you have, the beginning, the rip, and then a consolidation, another rip, and then everything coming back. That you can break down into several stages. Call it, imagine it like a movie with its beginning, middle, and end. And if you conflate a pattern and a strategy, you will then say, well, okay, this guy said he trades it like this. That means every momentum has to be traded like here, which is basically somewhere in the middle of the movie. And you just always stay within that purview. Do you not realize that actually some maybe best fitted for your observational powers, for your own strategy and your own constraints? Constraints often determine what you can and can't do. And there's many constraints that change over time. For you to realize that the best for you is to be operating at the beginning or maybe at the end, which is why, as you've often said, it's often the trades that you say no to rather than the trades that you take on is what makes you as a trader, right? So we talk a lot about
and
this.
he's a master of that.
He is the master. He is the very definition of
saying no.
No. That is why at the very end of the book, we remake and relabel the razor as the power of denial. In the epilogue, we look at each chapter and we say what is perhaps the one word that fits best for each trader and the powers that can be extracted. The razor is the power of denial. The ability to deny himself when everything is flying around, Trump speaking, there's a million trillion opportunities, and he'll just wait for his one, which he'll go extremely big on. For him to also deny himself after missing, not taking on the trade in 2015, he missed it to not go crazy. He also denied himself after missing literally the actual trade in March 2020 to then take the next available train, so to speak, and then getting off it because it wasn't good. He said no to that. And then taking on the actual trade, doing very well, and then saying no to everything else that followed. So he could keep all of his P&L. So again, we talk a lot about this, it's directly quoted from the razor. His issues with people being contaminated, confusing patterns and strategies and so on and so forth, which is why coming back to the beginning is very much for these, for people. And I know this very well because I was stuck within this very messy period where you need just instant clarity of how you can whittle down the game to its absolute basics. We even suggest, again, in many multiple meanings, the razor is all about whittling it down to, can you just capture a tick in the market if all else fails? Because you eliminate so many variables, you eliminate so much variance. And if you can at least get those right, if you can get those basic pieces right, you can build on from there. But here's someone who's chosen to stay within that purview of just capturing a tick. And that, again, has shown us this unique trader. And one last thing I want to touch on is something, again, that comes up again and again in the book, the burdens of a strategy. You mentioned this earlier. He is someone who truly has taken on, so everything that you do has a cost. Everything about trading is made in the white space of the margins of the the white space and the things lost in between when you're reading about a strategy. When you're reading about how it's so profitable and so amazing to sit in a spread trade and to add into it when you're offside, and then it will come back and you win 80% of the time. And oh my God, isn't it so amazing? Okay, but what does that mean? What does it mean sitting in a position for 3 days offside and you don't know if it's going to become good or it's going to blow you out? What does it mean to sit in it for a weekend, wait for the Friday close, come back on the weekend and sit in these kind of trades? Or another trade. What does it mean to wait the entire week just for, to quote the razor, our main man Trump to speak and to trade upon his words, which you can send the markets flying any which way and you have to react in a split second? What does it mean to put on 1,000 S&P on a trade you've been watching for 10 years, So these are all burdens. You can't shy away from it. Strategies have a cost. And some people are better fitted to wearing some burdens better than others. And the element here is making sure that you are choosing the burdens that you can weather better than others. Again, the razor said, he can't handle being in markets for any length of time because he's deeply emotional. That is something he cannot bear. And he has evolved his trading in a way where that does not expose him negatively. If you did the same to the warrior, that would be his version of hell. Why? Because he can't help not being in the markets. When the markets are active and there is flow, literally, I think the worst torture in the world, the worst torture in the world for him is to strap him to his chair, strap his arms and wrists down to the chair, show him how the markets are gyrating and going crazy, and he can't do anything about it.
That's a sadomasochist in trading.
That is literally, I think, even him watching now, he could probably feel his heart like cringe and in pain, okay? And that's happened to him. That is actually in the Warrior story where that has actually happened. And actually, that's how we begin the Warriors chapter. We didn't strap him down precisely. There are other things that basically created that situation, but we'll leave it for the Warriors story. And again, they imagine swapping those two traders. Imagine putting the Razor to trade like the Warrior and the Warrior to trade like the Razor. You cannot. It will bankrupt them instantly. But by shouldering the correct burdens, it has forged these magnificent, anomalous, exceptional traders, which trading is all about trading in exceptional situations, as you said, Alex, exceptional information. On the prop side, in the back end, it's all about leveraging people in exceptional situations. And for the learner, it is all about identifying the anomalous, the exceptional. Why did they break the mold? Because in that, beyond the pale, where there is the exception, lies your treasure a lot of the time. It is not doing what everyone else is doing. It is not doing and I mean that in multiple ways, bringing on the culture, bringing on the dogma, bringing on the so-called edge in quotation marks. It is by looking at the exceptional, understanding where the trader of tomorrow is going, which, if you replay everything I just said over the past 60 seconds, is one of the many ways you can summarize traders of our time and the importance of writing this book, in the sense of all these things matter. Looking at a strategy where you're trading the retracement of the Euro stocks does not matter. It matters to you now, and it matters perhaps in the next week. But what matters the most when you come at a career crossroads where you've just lost $1 million in your account and what you do next? Those are the things that truly matter, not these transient strategies and trades and indicators and so on. That is, again, how do you build these to yourself? How do you leverage your observational power? How do you navigate these career crises, which so few people know how to handle, because by definition, you'll always meet them for the first time in your life. That is the power of a book and technology of preserving these experiences. So the next time you encounter them, you have, something to draw on. You have the lessons learned and preserved within the book. And yeah, after saying all this, I just wish I had this when I started trading, which is, again, one of the reasons we wrote the book.
And then, Bogdan, to close off there, especially your summary of, we have all these moments, these strategies in the market, but a trading career, you face multiple of these challenges for the very first time. And how do you deal with those challenges? Chapter 2, Traders of Our Time, a most inspiring chapter for anyone who is struggling, beginning of your journey, looking at a part in your life where everything seems lost. This chapter will inspire and spark you of what's possible, because these are traders with skin in the game, who have been there, who have done it. If you are waiting for the book on the 27th of March, 2025, and you cannot wait to read this chapter, we do have a free chapter on tradersofourtime.com. Chapter 1, we explore the floor, we explore the 10 central characters, a summary of them. And so you can download that chapter right now on tradersofourtime.com. And then the Razor, we just have to wait for that one. That comes out on the 27th of March, both on hardback and ebook format. And today has been incredibly exciting to discuss someone who's also a very close friend of mine, and someone who's changed the careers of many traders and inspired stories of other traders. So thank you, Bogdan, for today's session.
Thank you, Alex. And God willing, you'll continue to do so for the next generation. And see you in chapter 3, Alex.
Fantastic. See you there.